ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So welcome back to the Sri Harinam Chintamani series every Saturday and Sunday morning. Yesterday we discussed the last theme, or you can say the last theme of Sri Harinam Chintamani, that when one avoids the 10 offenses and also the seva aparadhs, then bhava uday, one will attain bhava. That was very clear in the previous discussions, say text 42 to 44. In the deity worship also, offenses have to be avoided, and especially in the chanting of the holy names. And in the stage of ecstasy bhava, one need be only slightly concerned about offenses in deity worship. So this was the theme which yesterday we had a discussion, and especially with this footnote, when the offenses to the holy name are gone, nama prada gata bhava seva hoy. Now here, if you see, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not saying seva prada gata, because I said seva aparadhs are not really that heavy obstacles in attaining Krishna Prem. These are minor, but at the same time, sadhakas who are practicing Vaidhi Bhakti have to be cautious not to commit seva aparadh. And we had a long discussion, if you remember, how if our attitude is casual about the seva aparadhs, then the seva aparadhs can turn into nama aparadhs. So it is nama aparadh which are the major hindrances. Gata, when it is gone, then bhava uday, bhava seva begins. So this bhava seva is basically manasiya seva, It is performed in the mind. And we saw from the Chaitanya Charitamrit, uh, Lord Chaitanya's instruction to Raghunath Das Goswami. All the verses yesterday we discussed how Raghunath Das Goswami was able to directly see uh, Krishna in the Govardhan Shila, and how he was able to witness the pastimes of Krishna. Because one thing is, this Bhava Seva begins in the platform of pure goodness, Shuddha Sattva. So you have to come, or you have to be at the stage of Bhava. So that is the criteria. It is done purely in the mode of goodness. And that is why Govardhan Shila worship is very, very exalted. And that mood of worship is the mood of Raj Bhakti. And that's why it's very, very unique to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Whereas we will now see some additional points. That time we'll see the difference between Shaligram Shila worship and the Govardhan Shila worship also. So yesterday we discussed all these verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrit. Now I will be discussing some additional points from Lord Chaitanya's instruction to Raghunath Das Goswami. These additional points from various devotees who have commented on Sri Harinam Chintamani, and some of the sannyasis have written some reflections on Sri Harinam Chintamani. Altogether, we have compiled some points. These are very important because from the verses, we might not clearly get a full understanding of what is this mood of worship, Bhava Seva, and neither we can understand whether we have adhikar and what are the other things which we need to be careful about. So we will now discuss these points so that everything will become clear. I will just just speak the points one after another. I will not give any explanation. But if devotees have questions, kindly raise your hands, and then we will take up the questions if you have questions. Okay. Lord Chaitanya had few Raghunathas in his camp, and so Raghunath Das became Raghu of Swarup Damodar. We have Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunatha Bhatta Goswami. So these were the two Raghunaths. There were also other Raghunaths among Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates. So Swarupera Raghunath, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Raghunath Das Goswami surrendered to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he kept him under the care of Swarup Damodar. Swarup Damodar is the assistant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Raghunath Das Goswami, being very humble, he used to directly never approach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even if he had any philosophical questions, he used to put forth these questions to Swarup Damodar, who would later ask Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then give the reply. So that was his mood of a servant of the servant. And Raghunath Das Goswami, among the 6 Goswamis, is quite famous and well known as Das Goswami. He is known as Das Goswami. Whenever Raghu of Swarup Damodar wished to ask Lord Chaitanya something, he would only ask through Swarup Damodar. I mentioned this. In this way, we learn that we must approach the Supreme Lord through the spiritual master. In Bengal, Raghunath had met Lord Chaitanya and had put a request to the Lord so that he may take the sannyas order. So now we are just narrating the history of Raghunath Das Goswami. Although Raghunath Das Goswami wanted to take sannyas, but still Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, go back and live as you are. And when the internal renunciation will develop, then that will be the right time. So similarly, this is also instruction for us that we should unnecessarily not, whichever ashram we are situated, we should be steadily situated in that and advance in Krishna consciousness. And when the right time comes, then we should go to the higher order. So this again is a very important instruction which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching through Raghunath Das Goswami. The Lord refused this request and instructed Raghunath that he must remain in family life while practicing renunciation inwardly. And we know that famous instruction, how just like a wife has a paramour, how she will do all her duties at home so that nobody will doubt her. But in her heart, she will always be thinking when she can meet her paramour. So this is the mood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks in those verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So externally, uh, be like a materialist, but internally develop cultivation. So this is the right mood which we should follow. One day, Raghunath was fortunate enough to perform devotional service to Lord Nityananda and the Vaishnava devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when he cultivated like this, then the Lord's mercy was bestowed in the form of Raghunath Das Goswami serving Nityananda and all the Vaishnava devotees. And this is the Dahi Chida Utsav, which happened at Panihati. It is there that Raghunath Das Goswami got the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu and Raghav Pandit. He, uh, served both the Lords Mahaprasad, and he was given the opportunity to take that remnants of the Mahaprasad. And in one sense, it's not only Lord Nityananda who played a crucial role in bestowing mercy to Raghunath Das Goswami, it was Raghav Pandit also, who was one of the also favorites of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Being very pleased, Nityananda requested all the devotees to bless Raghunath so that all his impediments would be removed. So he was entangled in family life, and all these shackles can only be destroyed only by the mercy of the spiritual master. The karma bandhan can be destroyed just by having darshan of the spiritual master. It is not possible by any other means. So all these impediments were removed. With these blessings, Raghunath was free to take up his rightful position as a servant of Sri Gaur Sundar. When he eventually met the Lord and took the renounced order, the Lord blessed him by giving him a Govardhan Shila. So Raghunath Das Goswami is our ideal Acharya for those who want to be in the renounced order of life. And we know how initially Raghunath Das Goswami was every day honoring the Mahaprasad, Mahaprasad of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which Govind personally was giving. But then he stopped that. He was going and begging at the Simmadhvar. And then he started thinking after a few days, what is this? I'm always thinking, who will come and give me some prasad? So this is prostitute mentality. So he even gave up that. And then he, whatever was left over, which was not used even for cooking for Lord Jagannath, which was there in some corner where even the cows would not take, there Raghunath was cleaning the rice grains and having it. So this was the renunciation Raghunath Das Goswami exhibited. After this, when he exhibited the highest pinnacle of renunciation, then Mahaprabhu blessed him with the Govardhan Shila. And then we have seen those verses yesterday from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. With this, Raghunath understood that the Lord had granted him a place at Govardhan with Rupa and Sanatan. He understood that Srimati Radharani had mercifully given him shelter. So with this, he could understand. By giving the Govardhan Shila, he was given a residence in Govardhan. And the Gunjamala was also given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which meant he was given the service to Srimati Radharani. In the previous text, a quote is given from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita to state that Bhava Seva is worship in complete goodness and is authorized when carried out in that way. So we mentioned again, it is Shuddha Sattva, and only then it is authorized. Further than this, the Lord gave Raghunath a Govardhan Shila to offer such worship to. In this way, we see how worship of Govardhan can facilitate Bhava Seva worship. So the Lord gave Raghunath the Govardhan Shila, and how to perform Bhava Seva or Manasi Seva to the Govardhan is what we learn from the life of Raghunath Das Goswami. We saw that verses how just by thinking that, oh, Lord Chaitanya gave me this Shila, he used to float in an ocean of bliss. And when he used to offer those flowers and manjaris and do the worship of the Govardhan Shila and actually have the darshan of Krishna, he used to be in transcendental bliss. So this facilitates Bhava Seva worship. With this in mind, please transcend the Anarth Nivritti stage of chanting. And when you clear the stage, you will have surmounted the Namaprads and become eligible to perform Bhava Seva, worship in complete goodness. Now, here are some practical instructions which are important for us to understand, and that's why we are discussing these points. So, having understood from the life of Raghunath Das Goswami, first thing is we have to cross the Anarthavati stage and come to the stage of Nishta. And we know that only at the stage of Nishta, one is more inclined to practice Raganuga Bhakti, following the mood of the eternal associates of Vrindavan, the Ragatmika Bhaktas. So that mood slowly is cultivated in the Raganuga sadhana with Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti. And when one, especially Vishwanath Chakra Thakur mentions when Tada Rajastamo Bhava Kamalobhadaschayeta Chet Eter Anavidam Stitvam Satvai Prasidati. Stitvam Satvai Prasidati, he mentions, is Shuddha Sattva. So when, as he gets the adhikar in his Raganuga sadhana, he becomes eligible to perform Bhava Seva. Thereby, you will be eligible to worship the Govardhan Shila, as did the Brahmana Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath's meditations were so pure that he could see the Supreme Lord within the stone. In his mind, he would constantly remember the Lord giving him the Shila. In this way, he attained perfection through remembrance of Krishna. So his chitta was pure because only at the stage of Ruchi, we have taste for chanting because the heart is pure. And Smaran, if you remember, is one of the most important elements in the practice of Raganuga Bhakti. So Smaran can only happen after one has crossed Anarth Nivritti. So in this way, just remembering that the Shila was given to the Lord, he used to float in an ocean of bliss. And just remembering Krishna, and he was able to see Krishna in the stone. From the example of Raghunath, we can understand that Lord Chaitanya is teaching that worship of Govardhan Shila takes place within the mind. This is the most important point to be noted. Manasya Seva, as I mentioned. Therefore, if you're thinking in terms of worshipping the Shila in this way, then please make sure that you are qualified. Adhikar. We have the adhikar. First, see whether we have the adhikar. Srila Prabhupada in the Nectar of Instructions 8 verse Tannamarupacharitadi sukuirtanano smartyo kramena manasa niyojya. No, I think I'm missing the second line. Rasanasya manasi niyojya. Smartyo kramena rasanasya manasi niyojya. Smartyo kramena, one should be able to continuously remember systematically, step by step, kramena. Rasanasya means to engage the tongue and the mind. The tongue should be engaged constantly in chanting and only honoring prasad, and the mind should be constantly engaging in remembering Krishna. So this is only possible after Anarth Nivritti. So we should see whether we have that adhikar. Remember the words of these texts in Chaitanya Charitamrita and this chapter. Bhava Seva commences only after one has surmounted Namaprads. In Chaitanya Shikshamrit by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the following is written in connection with this topic. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in all his works, very carefully he handles these subjects, and many places he speaks about the adhikar. So here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he is speaking about it. Let us hear what he says. The life of an advanced devotee is very pure, and his taste is also very pure. This is how it begins. Mahaprabhu taught this to Raghunath Das briefly. Smilingly, smiling, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Das, I have already appointed Sarup Damodar Goswami as your instructor. You may learn from him what your duty is and how to discharge it. I do not know as much as he. Nevertheless, if you want to take instructions from me with faith and love, yesterday we know what faith and love means, Shraddha. We gave 3 levels of understanding of the meaning of the word terms Shraddha, faith and love. You may ascertain your duties from the following words. Do not talk like people in general or hear what they say. Grama katana shunibe, gramya varta na bolibe. So Gramya Kata is not only worldly talk. The deeper meaning of Gramya Kata means there are Indriya Gramya, the sense set of the senses and the sense objects. Talking about the sense objects or talking about sense gratification is also Gramya Kata. Balna paibe, balna, do not eat luxuriously and do not dress luxuriously. In your mind, render service to Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan. So this is the instruction Mahaprabhu personally gave to Raghunath Das Goswami. In these instructions, the Lord also hinted in a covered way about the internal worship of Radha Krishna through the 8 time periods of the day known as the Ashtakaliya Leela Bhajan. So yesterday we mentioned that devotees should not read especially these Ashtakaliya Leela Bhajans, because only this is possible when one has purified his mind by practicing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and he is in a very exalted position. And it happens spontaneously because of the purity of the heart. So sadhakas are recommended not to read this, and it is a matter of purity which will naturally manifest when one is a Uttamadhikari. Elsewhere in this book, Chaitanya Shikshamrit, in the instructions of the Lord gave to Sarup Damodar, this topic will be discussed. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur discusses this in his Chaitanya Shikshamrit and also in Jaiva Dharma. But where these all topics come, that is very important to see. If you see Jaiva Dharma or Chaitanya Shikshamrit, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is first presenting the Tattva. He begins with basic Gita, Sambandha Gyan, Jiva Tattva, and Ishwar Tattva, the Tattva Traya, Prakriti, Jiva, and Jagdishwar. And that philosophical discussion is highly taxing if you see. So 15 chapters in the Jaiva Dharma are discussing all this Tattva, Sambandha, Videya, Prayojan. And then he introduces these higher topics. So first one has to understand Tattva, and then slowly with the purification of the mind, then we can understand these other topics. So both in Chaitanya Shikshamrit and Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is first presenting the Tattva. So the devotee should be careful to be qualified for such teachings. So that's what Prabhupada repeatedly hammers in his Bhaktivedanta purports in the Bhagavatam, right from the first canto till 9th canto, that one should not jump to the Rasapajanthyaya. One should systematically, chapter after chapter, canto after canto, read the first 9 cantos and become a self-realized soul. Then one can enter into the 10th canto. So like that, there is adhikar for such teachings. The mentality during Vaidhi Bhakti, exclusive cultivation of devotion with the aim of achieving Bhava Bhakti, and the mentality during Bhava Bhakti, intense cultivation with the aim of achieving Prema, is called Nirbandhani Mati, undivided attention. If such concentration exists, then very quickly the devotee attains perfection. In other words, the devotee must make an effort corresponding to the goal he wishes to achieve. From the very beginning of practice, the devotee must adopt this concentrated attention and should beware of giving it up because of distraction or inattention. So this is in the Chaitanya Shikshamrit, page 65. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is speaking about undivided attention, nirbandini mati. So Vaidhi sadhakas should practice with full concentration their sadhana in order to attain bhava bhakti. The bhava bhaktas have that spontaneous concentration to attain prema bhakti. So at least in our sadhana stage, we should have this, at least the simple practice of trying to sit and hear attentively one mantra, one round, and 4 rounds, sitting in one place and doing 4 rounds at least. And we know that 4 rounds is one granthi. And we spoke about the Utsar technique. If you remember, the Utsar technique is very important. How we make a block of 4 attentive rounds, then 8, then 12. So in a group of 4 we do, and that is called as granthi. We discussed that. So at least for sadhakas, for us, nirbandini mati is what this is practical for us to do. And naturally, it will happen if we do this, then quickly we will cross the anarth nivritti stage in our Vaidhi sadhana practice, and then nirbandini mati will follow in Raganuga sadhana. In this quote, we see that the way a devotee raises from sadhana, Vaidhi bhakti, to Raganuga is to perform service with undivided attention. So from Vaidhi, he goes to Raganuga, following the Ragatmika Bhaktas. And what is required? Undivided attention, absorption. Absorption is the key, the practice. The word nirbandini means undivided, which is derived from the words incessantly, nirbandha, nirbandha. In the sadhana stage of Vaidhi Bhakti, a devotee progresses through cultivating his devotion via constant practice. Every day, it is a matter of practice and making a habit of it. In the bhava stage, a devotee uses Raganuga Bhakti as his mode of worship, and his cultivation of devotion takes on a more refined state. His worship then turns into cultivation of prema or love. In cultivating prema, rules and regulations get in the way. Therefore, a devotee must change his way of worship from Vaidhi to Raganuga. In this way, a devotee meditates on the Ashtakaliya Leela, the eightfold pastimes of the Lord. Such pastimes are imbued with loving sentiments and take place with a loving mood devoid of awe and reverence. Thakur Bhaktivinoda is giving warning about the instructions the Lord gave to Sarup Damodar in this matter. So we might sometimes get attracted to the result and rush to the subject. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving warning. We have to see the other side. There is a famous saying, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in all of his works, he's speaking about the other side of the instructions. And here he's giving that warning here. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says a sadhaka should be careful to be qualified for such teachings on the Ashta Kaliya Leela Bhajan. Or in other words, if an unqualified devotee hears such teachings and acts on them, trying to perform his bhajan in the Bhava Seva category before he is qualified, it may be to his detriment. So it will be detrimental to his spiritual practices. Even a patient who is getting treated, and if he is given a very high dose of injection, which he cannot handle it, then it will be detrimental to the patient. So similarly, the purification of the heart is required for this category of bhajan. Devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are not sahajas, nor are they whimsical followers, following according to their own speculations and not scripture. So the sahaja mentality uh, is what we should become free from. When an aspiring devotee performs his bhajan according to the rules of Raganuga Bhakti, while being only qualified to perform worship according to the rules of Vaidhi Bhakti, he becomes nothing but a nuisance. So if he takes up to Ragana Bhakti, but he's qualified for Vaidhi, then it's a big nuisance. The topic of performing the topic of performing Raganuga Bhakti comes in the category of performing a very advanced form of devotional service. The gopis perform Ragatmika Bhakti, and one may similarly perform this kind of devotional service if one is following in their footsteps and has attained a great degree of purity given from the sadhana of chanting and service. So we know the definition itself of Raganuga Bhakti is following the Ragatmika Bhaktas. And when one is practicing Raganuga Bhakti, when greed has arisen, spiritual greed. So lobha and attracted to the tad madhurya bhava, attracted to that mood of the sweetness of Vrindavan devotees, one is hankering for that same mood and he follows these eternal associates. So in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami speaks 3-4 verses on, who is qualified to practice Raganuga Bhakti. And then what are the practices of a Raganuga Sadhaka? 3 verses are there. And if you see, then we can clearly understand, oh, I'm not at this level to practice Raganuga Bhakti. So we should be very, very careful about this adhikar. One may not commit any of the 10 offenses and perform one's action in a bid to gratify the senses, and at the same time think oneself qualified to perform Raganuga Bhakti. This fact should be understood by all. Taking a look from the beginnings, Jiva should follow the rules of Varnashram until he comes to the stage of sadhana, and then he should follow the rules of sadhana bhakti. Following the rules of Vaidhi worship, he should do what his spiritual master instructs. And these instructions should be in accord with the previous acharyas. If there is any ambiguity in the instructions of the acharya, the rules of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra are there to help clarify the ambiguity. When the majority of the Anarth Nivritti stage has been traversed, the sadhaka is ready to perform Raga Bhakti. And in this way, his mood of worship changes as has been described in the previous paragraphs. So we have been discussing all this and I hope it is clear. Raganuga Bhakti is devoid of restricting rules because the performer is situated in pure goodness. If this procedure is not followed, the result is nothing but a disturbance in the society. Utpat eva kalpate, as Rupa Goswami also says in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So we just make an external show that we are very exalted and, people can identify it and it becomes a nuisance in the society. The person performing seva in the mood of Raganuga will also follow the rules and regulations so that he may teach others. But in his private meditations, bhajan, he will perform bhava seva. So Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu mentions sadhaka rupena siddha rupena. Seva sadhaka rupena siddha rupena chasyo. Means a Raganuga sadhaka in his sadhaka sharir, he will follow all the rules of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti in order to set an example. But in his internal contemplation, where he's developing his spiritual body, he in his meditation and chanting, he will perform bhava seva. He will follow the eternal associates. In the sadhaka sharir, he will follow the acharyas and the 6 Goswamis. So like that, that is the practice of a Raganuga sadhaka. Although some may claim that Srila Prabhupada's instructions are not taking rocks from Govardhan were instructions to take the stones back to Govardhan. An example of this was written in a letter sent to Palika, who wished to worship Govardhan Shila in Sridham Mayapur. So many devotees would like to have the Shila, because when you come to Govardhan, you can pick it up. Knew that it requires adhikar to worship Govardhan Shila. And you can see this letter which we are quoting, what is Prabhupada saying. Now, the instructions, Prabhupada. There is bathing. So Palika Devi had asked many questions, and Prabhupada is one by one replying. Oh, it is not clear. Okay, let me check the connection. Voice is not clear. Huh? Just a minute. Okay. Let me change the connection and see. Oh. Hare Krishna. So let us see now. Is it better with this connection? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, there is one. Yeah. Basically, what Prabhupada's instructions sometimes like taking rocks, but Prabhupada was very clear. He, in fact, was very heavy that the rock should be kept back in Govardhan. So, the standard example is of one letter where Prabhupada is answering some of the questions raised by Paliki Devidasi. First was about bathing the Chaitanya deity. Then, of course, you should always cleanse him with dry or damp cloth from time to time, but no daily bathing process is recommended by me for the time being. So Prabhupada step by step and systematically introduced deity worship even in the Western world. You may dress him in the same manner as Lord Krishna. Deities should be changed in early morning after Mangalarti, before noon offering, and before Sundararti. They should be put on their fine dress. Then Prabhupada, the fourth thing you can mark here, Govardhan rock should be returned to Mount Govardhan as soon as possible. Prabhupada is saying as soon as possible. And then he, other instructions, what he had to mention, he mentions. So Prabhupada is very clear about it. In summarizing these teachings on Seva Prad, we can say the following. In deity worship, a devotee must be on guard to the various Seva Prads that pertain to his worship. But in worship of the Govardhan Shila, or the worship in the mood called Bhav Seva, we see that there is not so much possibility of committing Seva Prad, as this worship is carried out by those in the mode of goodness, and most of this worship is carried out within the mind. So here we are seeing the difference between deity worship and the worship of Govardhan Shila. In deity worship, there are considerations of seva, and why sadhakas should carefully study the sevaprads and avoid it, and develop deep attachment to the deities, deep attachment to the chanting, and advance in Krishna consciousness. But when one is performing Govardhan Shila worship, there's no question of aparad, because firstly it is done in the mode of goodness. You are an sitva sattve prasidati. Second is, most of the worship is carried out in the mind. And in the mind, there are no offenses, in one sense. Saying this, every devotee must always be on guard against the various namaprads or offenses against the holy name and the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Namaprad and Vaishnava prad. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains the system of rising from sadhana to prema as follows. Now, this is from the Bhaktiyaloka, which we are quoting. In the process of sadhana bhakti, there are 4 stages: Shraddha, Nishtha, Ruchi, and Asakti. Note this point of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In the process of sadhana bhakti, there are 4 stages: Shraddha, Nishtha, Ruchi, and Asakti. After passing these 4 stages, one comes to the level of Bhav, which is the doorstep of Prema. So according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there are only 6 stages. 4 stages in sadhana bhakti, the 5th stage is Bhava bhakti, and the 6th stage is Prema bhakti. Very interesting analysis here. Now, what is missing? Something in the sadhana bhakti stages. Anyone would like to point out? Raise your hand. In this statement, in the process of sadhana bhakti, there are 4 stages, Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying. And then the 5th stage is Bhava bhakti, the 6th stage is Prema bhakti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is about 6 stages together. In sadhana bhakti, 4 stages, Bhava bhakti is 1 stage, and Prema bhakti. Yes, Amal Bhakti Rani Mataji.
Sadhu Sangha.
Then, which else is missing?
Sadhu Sangha, and then I'm just getting through the.
Okay, can you repeat first Shraddha? After Shraddha is Sadhu Sangha.
Bhajana Kriya.
Kriya. After Bhajan Kriya is? After Bhajan Kriya is Anarth Nivritti.
Yeah.
Anarth Nivritti. And then comes the stage of Nishtha,
Ruchi, Asakti.
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is skipping these 3 stages. That is Sadhu Sangha, Bhajan Kriya, and Anarth Nivritti. He directly says Shraddha, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti. Now, my question to you all is why? Why is so? What is the reason? He's doing this analysis from a different angle, but what is the reason? What is the reason for this? Anyone has any thoughts about it? You can try. I don't mind. Yes, Virendra Yadav Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Prabhuji, maybe Bhaktivinoda Thakur may be referring to Vishnu Sattva level, and there is,
No, there is a lot of background disturbance from your side. Difficult to hear. Yes, Maya Narasimha Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, I guess Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has included all those 4 stages in Shraddha, because the Shraddha becomes firm after Anartha Nivritti. So I think he has taken all that into one, that is Shraddha.
Yes, in one sense it is true. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Bhaktiyaloka explains, 1 minute, I'll just. In Bhaktiyaloka explains, if the pure, guileless faith, that is what he uses the term, means one is very sincere and pure, where his heart is very pure. A moment he meets a sadhu, he takes up to the chanting, and usually the stages of bhajan kriya where anarth nivritti happens is utsamai. Utsamai is, it is not real enthusiasm, but it is false enthusiasm. And that is why you go through these 6 stages of anarth nivritti purification, the 6 stages in bhajan kriya. There is utsamai, not utsamai is there. And because utsamai is there, why? The utsa is very newfound love. And then you know, because the heart is not pure, there is ghana and tarala. And you go through these stages of ghana and tarala, and then there is Vyudavikal, the intelligence oscillates in understanding or ascertaining the meaning of the scriptures or determination in the practice, what I should do. That's why there is Vyudavikalpa. And then there is Vishaya Sangara, tussle internally happening with the senses and sense objects. And then there is Niyamakshama, and then there is Tarangarangini. So one whose heart is pure, he has such deep faith that his faith itself is like firm faith. So that's why sometimes Nishta is termed as firm faith. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur here is speaking about somebody who is Uttam Adhikari, who is having adhikar to practice Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. That's why he's got proud Shraddha and is Shastrukta Nipuna. So very rare such souls, enter ISKCON or enter into the field of Bhakti, who just, the day one they take up to practice, and within few days they start giving lectures on Krishna Katha or the Siddhanta. Srila Vishwanacharya Thakur came to Vrindavan, and in Vrindavan he was staying with one of the disciples of Kaviraj Goswami, and he immediately started composing books and started giving lectures. So very rare are such souls. So that's why he is only including everything here in Shraddha. Shraddha, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti. So that's one understanding. And then he's speaking about the 5th stage, that is the Bhava stage, and the 6th stage as Prema. According to the degree of faith, each level has different rules. As one leaves behind one level and progresses to the next, he should honor the rules of the later and leave aside those of the former. Those who do not give up the rules of the previous level are bound by those rules like chains that do not allow him to proceed to the next level. If one is still committing aparadh, his faith in Sri Krishna is not as its strongest, and as such, he must be governed by the rules that govern his particular faith. However, when one's faith increases, one acts accordingly and attains steadiness, taste, attraction, and devotion. While there are anathas present, a person is considered to be not as at incomplete goodness and not qualified to perform Bhava Seva. This is because Bhava Seva commences only after one has stopped or almost stopped Namaprads. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Bhavati means it becomes. The devotion becomes steady. And that is because the mode of passion and ignorance is completely pacified. And in one sense, if you see, we commit aparadhs because we have not controlled our senses. So when on the stage of Nishta, one is in the mode of goodness, he doesn't commit offense, he chants with ekagrata, with one pointedness in the mode of goodness. So the list of Namaprads is there in the Padma Puran from chapter 4 onwards till chapter 13. We have discussed that, if you remember. Shri Harinam Chintamani is a guide book to help sadhakas overcome the 10 offenses listed above and take one through the various stages of sadhana stated in the previous quote of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The various stages of sadhana we marked here in blue, if you remember. When offenses have been overcome, the worship with the aim of cultivation devotion of the holy name becomes Bhava Seva, chanting carried out with love and devotion. The holy name is therefore the means for the jiva to reach the ultimate resting place. And at the same time, it is their resting place. Mayeva mana adastva, mayi buddhim niveshaya. Nivashyasi mameva ata urdvam na samshaya. Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita 12.8, Mayeva mana adastva. In the devotee's heart or in the mind and intelligence, Krishna is residing. And the devotee is also residing in Krishna. So that is the point here, what we are seeing from the notes. I'll just show you this verse. Mayeva mana adasva. Just fix your mind upon me and engage all your intelligence in me. You will live in me. Nivashyasi mayeva. You are reside in me. That's what. So here it is the question of the purification of the subtle body. And we know that when the subtle body is free from all anarthas, all the impurities, all material affections based on the bodily concept and the bodily relations, then the spiritual affection for the Lord manifests. So that is what is Bhava Seva here. May the Lord bless all to attain loving devotion to his lotus feet in the form of worship, sadhana of his holy name, rising to Bhava Seva and eventually Krishna Prem. We would like to mention here that worship of Govardhan Shila is different to that of Shaligram Shila. So this is another important point we wanted to discuss. In the worship of Shaligram Shila, we see how many benedictions are offered to the worshipper. Whereas the worship of Govardhan, the benediction that is offered is Krishna Prem. So here is one difference. In this way, we can see that Shaligram worship pertains to worship in the mood of awe and reverence. It's more in Aishwarya mood, which is a step that can take the worshipper further. Krishna is worshipped in this way when he is in Mathura, Dwarka. There he is known as Vasudev. Vasudev, not Vasudev, Vasudev. He is also worshipped in the mood of awe and reverence in the various Vishnulok planets in Vaikuntha as Narayan, or any other of the Lord's unlimited Vilas expansions, such as Lord Narasimhadev, Lord Vara. If, after hearing all this information, one still decides to worship the Govardhan Shila before one has reached Bhav Seva, it is claimed that, this is claimed by the very senior devotees in ISKCON, that the deity may reciprocate with the worshipper in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. In this case, the deity is offered the 16 types of paraphernalia as worship. The Govardhan Shila worship, if you do, it is more than in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. To worship the Govardhan Shila in complete goodness is recommended, and this mode of worship is governed by Lord Chaitanya's manifest instructions. So Govardhan Shila is completely done in the mode of goodness, and it is more Bhava Seva and Manasa Seva as we mentioned. But if we don't have the adhikar and still want to do it, then the mood will be different. If we cannot find an example of our service and relation to Lord in Chaitanya Lila, or if we find an example that states opposite, then we would do better following the example set by Lord through the life of his great devotees. The worship of the Govardhan Shila is carried out in the Lord's intimate mood of Raj. In this mood, the conceptions of awe and reverence impede rasa. So here is an important point. Now, Govardhan Shila, as I was mentioning, is more in Vraj Bhakti mood. And in this mood, there is no awe and reverence. Indeed, in Vraj, Krishna's intimate friends treat him as equal. Tumi kon bada, ami tumi sama. That's what, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 4th chapter it is mentioned. Or subservient. In the different moods found in Vrindavan, all relations with Krishna are imbued with love and devotion, which is the characteristic of Krishna Prem. The high position of the Bhav stage is stated in text 9 of this chapter Bhava Seva commences only after one has surmounted the Namaprads. In this stage of Seva, one has to become free from offenses. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur also in the Harinam Chintamani verse, we saw that when one has avoided all the Namaprads, then he will come to the stage of Bhava Bhakti. That was what Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioned also in the verse in Harinam Chintamani. We saw the verse. When the offenses to the holy name are gone, the stage of Bhava is manifest. Nam Aprada Gata Bhava Seva Hoy. So the same point is here mentioned. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear how the Lord's intimate friends in Vrindavan defeat him in mock fighting and ride on his back as their reward. And further, we hear how the gopis made statements that praise the Lord for their hearts, while at the same time, their statements criticize the Creator. We cannot do that. Such things cannot be possible if one has offenses covering the heart. Quoting the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, Lord Chaitanya says the following regarding the residents of Vrindavan. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila. All men and women were accustomed to enjoying the beauty of the shining face of Lord Krishna, as well as his shark-shaped earrings swinging on his ears. His beautiful features, his cheeks, and his playful smiles all combined to form a constant festival, Nitya Utsavam, Mahotsavam for the eyes, and the blinking of the eyes became obstacles that impeded one from seeing that beauty. For this reason, men and women became very angry at the Creator. So this is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila Sanatana Shiksha. Giri Govardhan is known as the Lord's best devotee, as he manifests all that is needed for the Lord's pastime to occur. Haridasa Varya. There is a hint of his majesty and eternal position within these words. For a devotee who is following in the mood of Rajvasis, worship of Govardhan Shila is very important, and indeed it is recommended that an advanced devotee take a stone from Govardhan and worship it in complete goodness. It is important, but at what stage? That is also important to know. We hope here that we can see the difference between the advanced devotee and the intermediate or the beginning devotee. The advanced devotee performing Bhav Seva is a pure Vaishnava who is fit to worship in the mode of goodness because he is free from anarthas. Whereas the intermediate devotees should simply serve the pure devotee and pray for his blessings to cross over the anartha stage and become situated in Shuddha Sattva. So the first criteria is Shuddha Sattva. Bhava Bhakti definition, Rupa Goswami says, Shuddha Sattva Vishesha Atma, Prema Suryansha Samya Bhav, Ruchipi Ischit Mashanya, Tad Bhava Aso Uchate. So Uttamadhikari means one who is on the stage of Bhava or Prema. So the Madhyamas should serve the Uttamadhikaris. NOI also says that one should serve. In the 5th verse also it is mentioned. It is true that in the Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada stated that a great devotee may take a stone from Govardhan and worship in the privacy of his home. And in a letter to Giriraj Maharaj, he states, a devotee of ISKCON may take a stone from Govardhan to worship. Now, we presented these arguments. Now, the other side of the arguments, you all might present. Oh, Prabhupada, if you see this statement in Krishna book or the letter to Giriraj Maharaj, Prabhupada is saying that we can do this. But we can understand from the authority of Sri Harinam Chintamani that the person who takes such a stone for worship must have transcended Anartha Nivritti stage, and thus his pure worship is authorized when carried out in the mode of goodness. In this way, when Srila Prabhupada uses the word a great devotee or a devotee of ISKCON, he is implying someone who is on a higher level and not a sadhaka who is on the Kanishk level of advancement. Prabhupada's statement should not be taken out of context. We'll have to, see from Shastra Chakshu. Prabhupada is saying a great devotee. So it's not a Kanishta Dikari. The Kanishta level is classified by the authority of Sri Harinam Chintamani as being the level where one is becoming a devotee, but because of weak faith, he has so far only become a shadow devotee. Vaishnav Abhas, that's a term Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses, Vaishnav Abhas. So, just a minute. Let me see how many more slides to go. Okay. There are a few more slides to be discussed. I will just finish that and then take on the questions. We will just take 10 more minutes and finish this chapter so that next week we can start the 15th chapter. The Kanishta Adhikari still has anarthas covering his heart, which cover his real identity and cause him to make associations based on the statement, I am the enjoyer. Srila Prabhupada also indicated that a great devotee should worship Govardhan in the privacy of his home. This indicates that the worship of Govardhan is a private affair that is in line with the Bhava Bhajan category that has been previously been outlined by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. If ISKCON temples were to worship Govardhan as a public affair, the general public will follow suit and at their own behest and whims, they will take stones from Govardhan and worship according to speculation and sentimentality. Yad yad acharati shreshtas tad tad evetaro jana. The word anuvartante, which is to be found in this verse, means to follow in the footsteps of. In this way, if ISKCON were to worship Govardhan Shila in their temples, common men will follow in their footsteps and worship Govardhan Shila in their homes, thinking that Govardhan Puja has been authorized by ISKCON, who are following the Acharya Srila Prabhupada. To support the statement that we have just made regarding the use of the words a great devotee to imply a very high level devotee, we can quote Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who gives reference to the great height that a devotee rises to. Speaking to the Sayodhini Brahmana, the Lord instructs people in the behavior of a devotee as follows. Dharma stapana hetu sadhura vyavar. A devotee's behavior establishes the true purpose of religious principles. At this point, you may wonder why are we explaining the worship of Govardhan at such great length? And we are seeing that many devotees are worshipping this Govardhan Shila, where we have to see whether they have adhikar. Such people may become sentimental about worshipping Govardhan Shila, take few rocks, and they may say, this is little blackish, so is Krishna, this is white, this is Balram, and this is Giri Govardhan, like that. In this way, people may have many Shilas, 10 or more, and they may keep in their bedrooms or anywhere they like. To give a final authorized explanation, Srila Prabhupada's Veda base gives the following quote from the handbooks and reference section on Govardhan worship. So you can see this, there is a handbook of worship, and there is one section which is of Govardhan worship. Just as Lord Chaitanya blessed Raghunath Das Goswami by giving him a Shila from Govardhan Hill to worship, one must obtain the blessings of the sadhu who is a resident of Govardhan in order to take a Govardhan Shila for worshipping. Unauthorized taking of even a small pebble from Govardhan is known to bring dire consequences to the person or persons involved. Whereas one injunction calls for compensating Govardhan for any removed stone with its same weight in gold, local residents say that to do so is not really advisable in this age, since the personality of Kali resides in gold. In any case, such compensation is meant for those who would take a Shila without authorization. A devotee not wishing to offend Giri Govardhan will prefer to wait for the express blessings of authorized persons before taking up to the worship of Govardhan Shila. It may be concluded It may be concluded from this text that an advanced devotee alone can take a stone, or that one may take or be given a stone from Govardhan only by a resident of that place. We may address here, this statement does not simply mean a person who lives on the surface of Vrindavan Dham. This statement means a pure devotee who is an intimate associate of Radha Krishna in Vrindavan Dham. The spiritual master's prayers are there in the morning, what we chant, Samsara Davanala, Nikunjayono Ratikeli Siddhe. A person is fit to enter Vrindavan only when he has been introduced by a resident of that place. Similarly, when anyone else reaches the stage of being an advanced pure devotee, by the mercy of that pure devotee, he will also have Vrindavan manifest before his eyes, as did for Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. Vishaya chhadiya kabe shuddha hoibe man. Tabe ami, I don't recollect. Vishaya chhadiya kabe shuddha hoy man. Tabe hame Shri Haribo Vrindavan. When the material desires are completely eradicated, then we can see Vrindavan. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra as given by the lips of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will engender the chanter to love the Lord in any of the 5 rasas found in Vrindavan if one so wishes. In fact, it is 4 rasas. Without delay, give up the habit of offensive chanting and crossing over the anartha stage, chant without offenses in the mood of the residents of Raj. Please also note that Sri Mayapur is non-different from Vrindavan. So this is the theme which we have discussed today. These were some additional points about the Govardhan Shila worship. There is one last section which I will just quickly go through. And there is nothing much here. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is ending the discussion. Yes, there are only 4 verses. We'll just discuss this. A person who meditates on the holy name should be engaged in ecstatic devotional service, bhava seva. One who meditates, nama smarana karidare bhava seve kartavya. Shri nama smarane bhava sevara uday, tomara kripa prabhu jiva bhagyodaya. When a devotee meditates on the holy name, meditation is dhyan smaran. We know that 5 stages, Shravan Dasha, Varan Dasha, Smaran Dasha, Apan Dasha, and Sampadesha. So Smaran Dasha, internal meditation. Ecstatic devotional service, Bhava Seva, arises within him. Oh Lord, your mercy brings this good fortune to the conditioned souls. Bhaktira sadhana yata achaya prakar sei sab charame dea nama premasar. In the beginning, the devotee is engaged in devotional service and practice, sadhana bhakti. At the end, he is given great love for the holy name. Nama prema, prema nam it is. Ataiva namalay, nama rasamaje, anyaye prakara, shabataha nahi bhaje. Therefore, ataiva, one should chant the holy name. One should dive into the sweet nectar of the holy name. One should not adopt other ways to worship the Lord. So, Nam Bhajan, again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is stressing. Haridas agya bole akinchana jana harinama chintamani karila kirtana. By the power of Haridas mercy, Haridasa kripa, Haridasa agya, a penniless beggar, bole akinchana jana, writes Sri Harinam Chintamani. Harinama karila kirtan. So that's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur ends this 14th chapter. And here there is few points which we will finish and wind up. This is the final instruction on Seva Prad, that one must overcome it by submerging oneself in the chanting of the holy name. Nam Ras. We should see whether we have Nam Ras. That when we chant 16 rounds, we feel, okay, let me sit and chant another 16 rounds. Do we have that Nam Ras? So for that, we have to become free from Vishaya Ras. Then only we get Nam Ras. If one desires to become qualified to perform Bhav Seva, one must go through the stage of Anartha by avoiding all offenses to the holy name. On the path of self-realization, the devotee will enter into rules regulating each stage. And as he enters into a new stage, he leaves behind the rules of the previous one. Now we are giving you some idea of uh, rules and regulations. Niyama. Niyamagra is discussed in Updeshamrit. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning that how, as we advance, we take up to higher rules and give up the lower ones. And that's how we can advance. So here is an example. The idea is as follows. Just hear this. With an increase in faith, the sadhaka performs sadhana bhakti, first receives steadiness, nishta. This replaces his unsteady nature. In this way, the sadhaka's mind becomes more peaceful and he can thus focus on his japa meditations better. So there is anishtita bhajan kriya and nishtita bhajan kriya. Anishtita bhajan kriya is done when anarthas are, when one is caught up in the anarthas, one is deep rooted in the anarthas. And when we cross this anishtita bhajan kriya stage, we come to nishtita bhajan kriya. In nishtita bhajan kriya stage, one is in the mode of goodness, one is peaceful, one is able to focus and chant. So at this stage, he must give up his unsteady nature. He has to give up his unsteady nature and advance further. Otherwise, if he is not able to give up, then he comes down and he has to purify himself and become free from that unsteady nature. Increasing his faith in Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, further, he next enters the stage of attaining a taste for chanting, ruchi. This replaces his taste for Maya. He doesn't have ruchi for material things, things that are not connected to the Lord. In this way, the sadhaka gives up the habit of speculating and puts full faith in the parampara of his system for attaining knowledge. Hearing the nectarian pastimes of the Lord increases the devotee's purified taste further. So he has to come to ruchi, then he has to give up ruchi for material things. So that's what he has to give up. If he's not able to give up, then he has to come down and transcend that and then go to ruchi stage. With a further deepening of faith, the sadhaka must leave his attraction for the items of the material world and the thought of being the enjoyer of such things. In this way, the sadhaka enters the stage of attaining attraction for the Lord, asakti. From this attraction for Sri Krishna, the devotee, who is by now very pure-hearted, yearns for connection with the Lord, and from this attraction, loving devotional service, bhava, will arise. With his increasing love for the Lord, bhava, spontaneous loving attraction, comes a natural occurrence, and the devotee cannot live without the Lord. In this way, he tastes Krishna Prem, and this taste becomes his prayojan, his indispensable need. Tasting this, he leaves behind the material world and he can never sin again. The holy name will prevent this ever happening. So he gives up the lower thing and then goes to the higher. If one does not give up the earlier stages, when one enters the higher ones, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur instructs that one will not progress. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna explains to Sridhava the process of pleasing him by engaging in unalloyed devotional service. Bhaktyaham ekaya graya shraddayatma priyasatam bhakti punati man nishta swapakan api sambhavat. By practicing unalloyed devotional service with full faith to me, one can obtain me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am naturally dear to my devotees who take me as the only goal of their loving service. By engaging in pure devotional service, even the dog eaters can purify themselves from the contamination of their low earth. The mercy of Lord Gauranga is that he gives all the opportunity to chant the holy name of the Lord and become elevated to the position of being the lover of God. Therefore, let everyone disapprove the chanting with offenses, and begin to chant attentively, which will in turn please Lord Gauranga, our Ishtadev. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Following in the footsteps of great authorities engenders one to become dear to them, and becoming dear to the great authorities engenders one to become dear to the Lord. So these were some just points with respect to the discussion of Mahaprabhu's instruction to Raghunath Das Goswami on the worship of Gauranga Shila, which required elaboration. Otherwise, there will be many questions devotees would have. And I suppose all the questions are answered in these points which we discussed from the PowerPoint. Anyone has any questions or clarifications? Any questions or any clarifications? Okay, one question we will take up. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. I wanted some explanation on Ragatmika, Raganuga and Vaidhi Bhakti.
Oh, for that you will have to attend the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu seminars.
Okay.
Raganuga Bhakti is that Bhakti which is following the Ragatmika Bhaktas. That is a simple definition of Ragatmika Bhakti. And who are the Ragatmika Bhaktas? The Ragatmika Bhaktas are the eternal associates of the Lord who have pure spontaneity towards the Lord. Rag, pure spontaneity, their internal thirst, pure spontaneity towards the object of their love, Ishtadev. And because of that pure spontaneity, the external symptom is that there is complete absorption in the object of their love. So these are the eternal associates, Ragatmika Bhaktas, and the Raganuga Bhaktas follow these eternal associates when they get the adhikar under the direction of the spiritual master and with the purification of the heart. So that is where one begins his Raganuga Bhakti. So Srila Rupa Goswami has dealt in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Eastern Division second wave after discussing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the 64 limbs, and what are not the limbs, then one limb, Ekanga and Anekanga Bhakti. After all that, then he starts discussing Raganuga Bhakti in 40 verses or 39 verses. Once we study that, then the subject matter becomes more clear. Any other clarification anyone has? Okay, so we'll stop here. Shri Harinam Chintamani ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki